Reality doesn't announce itself to you as some cold, objective fact. It doesn't come neatly packaged, labeled, and ready to be consumed. For most of us, it arrives as possibility, as abstraction, as something faintly understood but not yet lived. You might read about a storm, you might see pictures of it, but until the wind rattles your windows and the rain pounds against your skin, it doesn't penetrate your nervous system in a way that convinces you it is real. Perception precedes reality, and until you feel it, until it imposes itself upon your body and your psyche, it remains an intellectual exercise, a story someone else told. We live constantly in this strange tension between what we think is real and what actually becomes real for us. And that gap, that space between idea and experience, is where so many of our struggles lie. Because you can walk around with concepts in your head: justice, love, fear, failure, and none of them truly exist for you until they demand your participation. You can tell yourself you understand courage, but you don't understand courage until your hands are shaking and your voice is breaking, and you still step forward. It is only in that moment that the abstract crosses the threshold into lived reality. This is why people can drift for years believing things they have never embodied. They mistake intellectual knowledge for lived truth. But intellectual knowledge doesn't rewire your nervous system. Feeling does. And until the moment you collide with the experience, until it courses through you and rearranges you, your so-called reality is only potential, a shadow of what it could be. Nothing is real for you. No idea, no truth, no value, until it exacts a cost, until you feel the weight of its consequence. You can sit with books, theories, strategies, all the information in the world, and still remain untouched by it. Knowing about something is not the same as knowing it. You can study every page of a manual on swimming, memorize the mechanics of every stroke, understand the principles of buoyancy and resistance, and yet, when you are finally thrown into the water, none of that matters until your lungs tighten, your arms flail, and you either sink or learn to move. That is the difference between intellectual knowing and experiential knowing. One sits in the mind as possibility, the other imprints itself on the body as reality. Life is relentless in this demand. It will not allow you to substitute theory for practice. You might think you know what love is because you've read poems or listened to songs, but until you hold someone in your arms, trembling, terrified of losing them, you don't know love, you only know the idea of love. You might think you know what failure is because you've heard stories of others, but you don't know failure until your own efforts collapse, and you feel that crushing silence inside when no one comes to rescue you. Theories are safe. Ideas are comfortable. They cost nothing but time. Experience, on the other hand, extracts a price. It demands risk, vulnerability, and sometimes suffering. But that price is precisely what makes it real. Without it, knowledge remains suspended, detached, shallow, like staring at a map of a land you've never walked. You can point to the rivers and mountains, but you don't know the weight of the climb or the chill of the water. The map is not the territory. The idea is not the reality. You cannot truly know until you live it. Facts are empty shells until they are animated by feeling. You can repeat them, arrange them, even weaponize them, but they don't take root inside you until your emotions give them weight. Reality without emotion is sterile. It sits outside of you like an untouched object on a shelf. But the moment you feel it, the moment it stirs something deep in your chest, that's when it becomes yours. That's when reality crosses the threshold and imprints itself on your being. Take grief, for example. You can read about it, analyze it, even empathize in some distant way, but until you stand by a coffin and see the face of someone you loved lowered into the earth, you don't know grief. You only knew the word, not the reality. And once you feel it, you realize it is not an abstract concept but a force that rearranges your world, reshapes your identity, and presses itself into your memory with a permanence no book could ever provide. Or think of fear. You might study the psychology of fear, understand how adrenaline floods the body, how the heart races, how the mind sharpens. But all of that dissolves the moment you are standing in front of the unknown, and your knees lock, your mouth dries, and every fiber in you screams to run. In that instant, you are not studying fear, you are becoming fear's participant. That transition from distant understanding to lived embodiment is the transformation of reality through emotion. This is why so many people live detached from themselves. They think they know because they've collected facts, but they haven't allowed themselves to feel. They avoid the pain, the risk, the vulnerability, not realizing that by doing so, they remain insulated from reality itself. To feel is to be claimed by truth, and truth, when it arrives through feeling, is unavoidable. Emotion is not weakness, it is the signal that reality has sunk its claws into you. Without it, everything remains hypothetical, abstract, shallow. The moment you feel, you are forced to recognize, this is real, this is happening, this matters. And only then does the world cease to be a collection of ideas and become, instead, the undeniable fabric of your lived existence. A belief sitting in your head is nothing more than potential, a fragile structure that collapses the moment reality presses against it. You can say you believe in discipline, but if you never rise from bed when the alarm rings, if you never confront the resistance that whispers, "Stay comfortable," then that belief is hollow. It has no spine. It hasn't entered the realm of being. Belief becomes real only when you embody it, when you test it against action, when it demands something from you. Think about strength. You can convince yourself that you're strong, repeat it like a mantra, but unless you place yourself under the weight, whether it's a barbell on your shoulders or the burden of responsibility, you will never know if it's true. Strength is not a thought. It is the act of straining, failing, lifting again. Only in that lived repetition does the idea transform into reality. The same holds for courage. You can talk about bravery, admire it in stories, but it is not yours until you stand in a moment where fear claws at your throat, and you step forward anyway. That step is the crossing point, when belief leaves the mind and anchors itself in the world. Without that crossing, you are only a spectator of your own convictions, not their participant. This is the crucial distinction. Ideas remain sterile until they demand blood, sweat, or sacrifice. The gym does not exist for you until your muscles burn. Love does not exist for you until it costs you comfort and pride. Faith does not exist for you until doubt threatens to unravel it. Action is the crucible where belief is either proven or exposed as false, and it is through action alone that belief becomes being. Suffering is the doorway through which reality makes itself undeniable. You can speculate about hardship, imagine what it might feel like, but speculation evaporates the moment life presses down on you with its full weight. Pain strips away illusions in a way that comfort never can. When you are comfortable, you can tell yourself almost any story and believe it. But when you suffer, when you lose, when you fail, when you hurt, those stories collapse, and you are forced to confront what is real. Think of someone who studies endurance, who reads about human limits. None of that knowledge matters when they are gasping for air, their legs refusing to move, their mind screaming for them to quit. In that moment, endurance stops being a theory and becomes a lived reality, etched into their body with every labored breath. The same is true of loss, of rejection, of failure. These experiences burn themselves into you, and once they do, you carry their truth forever. This is why suffering has always been the teacher no one seeks but everyone remembers. It marks you, forces you to change, and leaves behind knowledge that no lecture could ever give. And while it feels cruel, it also reveals the depth of your own strength. You discover you can carry more than you imagined, that reality, though harsh, is survivable, and in surviving it, you become more real yourself. A map can show you the mountain, but it is the climb that teaches you the weight of gravity. A story can describe heartbreak, but it is the silence of an empty room that teaches you its depth. Suffering takes the abstract and brands it into your soul. And it is through that branding that reality stops being false and becomes undeniable. Reality doesn't simply arrive at your doorstep, fully formed, waiting for you to accept it. You have to meet it halfway, wrestle with it, and take responsibility for shaping it into something that matters. Without that active engagement, everything remains distant, hypothetical, an option rather than a truth. Responsibility is the bridge between possibility and reality, because it forces you to act, and action is where the false becomes real. Think of responsibility as the weight you choose to carry. When you take ownership of your choices, your failures, your direction, you bring clarity to your existence. Without responsibility, you drift in abstractions, convincing yourself that you could do this, you might achieve that. But once you commit, once you stake your being on a path, you collapse the infinite maybes into one undeniable reality. It may not be easy, but it is real, and it belongs to you. Avoiding responsibility leaves you living in illusion. You tell yourself comforting stories that you'll get serious tomorrow, that you'll change when conditions are better, that somehow reality will sort itself out. But it never does. Only when you shoulder the burden, when you decide to be accountable for your actions and their consequences, does life stop being a floating abstraction and harden into something tangible. And this is not a punishment, it's a privilege. Because in responsibility lies the power to transform potential into being. By acting, by carrying, by enduring, you discover that reality was never waiting to prove itself to you, you were waiting to prove yourself to it. That is the final step. To take ownership, to integrate what you've felt, and to live it fully. Only then does reality cease to be false and become, unmistakably, real.